Okay. Good evening, all of you. I think I'm audible to everyone. So we'll start this particular session. So in today's particular lecture, I will be discussing related to the social engineering, and we will discuss the basic concepts of social engineering and how it works actually. So this technique is basically different from the other information stealing technique used so far, because you are in a particular course and you are growing through too many things, but this will be something different. So in today's lecture, that will be a class of near about whatever half 1.5 hour or 1 hour. So we will be discussing something terms related to social engineering, and all the previous tools and techniques that are used for hacking a system are technical and requires a deep understanding of networking, operating systems, and other domains. Okay, but social engineering is more or less as considered as the non-technical part of gaining the information. Okay, so it is most popular among other techniques because of its ease as humans because of its ease as humans are most prone to mistake in terms of carelessness. Okay, so we will show you some of the particular things and how you can basically encounter these activities, and we'll go on to some of the news that we are having these days related to the social engineering. Okay, so in today's security model, basically what we include is the network security, that is the security of other resources of the corporate network. But the humans are the most important component of the security because they will be in the particular interface with them. Okay, so all security measures are dependent upon them, and if the user is careless to a secure uh, securing its login credentials, all security architectures will fail. Okay, so spreading awareness, training, and briefing the user about social engineering attacks, and the impact of their carelessness will help to strengthen the security from the endpoints. Okay, so the major concern of this lecture is basically awareing you about the fact what is social engineering all about. So this presentation will cover an overview of the social engineering concepts and the types of social engineering attacks, and basically you will learn how different social engineering techniques are. Okay, and also I will give you something in detail what is about the insider threats. How can an attacker impersonate on social networking sites? Impersonate, basically they will just exactly copy the entire thing. Identity theft, and how these threats of social engineering can be mitigated. Okay, so this is the main concern. Obviously everybody knows about the social engineering attacks, but still there is a lack of awareness. So how you will basically just uh, think about these particular attacks and what are the mitigation techniques that ought to be followed actually. So in this small presentation I will be just telling you something, and in last we will take some questions from you. Okay, so just to introduce with this particular thing, so in this particular lecture I will just tell you what is social engineering all about. So in detail we will be going into some of the attacks, and like uh, as per the definition of the social engineering goes, if it is a new term to many of the participants, so we'll get to know what is social engineering first, so that everybody basically understands what social engineering is. Okay, so basically I can define social engineering as an act of stealing information from humans. Okay, if somebody tries to steal some information from you actually by using some of the tricks, then that is termed as social engineering. Okay, so as it does not have any interaction with the target system or the network, so it is considered as a non-technical attack. Okay, so basically there will be no direct interaction to the target system or the network we are talking about. Okay, that is why some people basically call it as a non-technical attack. Okay, so we'll go with that also. So basically it is considered as the art of convincing the target to reveal the information. Okay, the people will convince you about to just steal your information, steal your credentials, steal your any other kind of premises information or your particular network information. Okay, so how this happens, basically we will go into them one by one. So some of the things are basically on the slide, so you can just relate to what I am saying. So basically, it may be physically one-to-one interaction with the target or convincing the target on any platform. Okay, such as the social media is a popular platform for social engineering these days. Okay, too many people out of you participants as well. Everybody is on the social media. Okay, so anyhow, if you are very careless, and then it's a possibility that you can compromise all these credentials and your particular information by these socially engineered attacks. Okay, so how basically this happens and what is the impact on the organization, we will see one by one. Okay, so this is the fact that the people are careless, as I've told you about, or unaware of the importance of the valuable information they basically have. Okay, so you have to be very careful. You should not just be very careless about all these particular valuable information that you basically have. Okay, so otherwise there will be huge impact on your organization. Like, there can be an economic loss. Obviously, if some of the important information goes out of your system, that can be easily available to the outsiders. Okay, so there can be some of the economic losses. There can be lawsuits and arbitrations. People can use that information to particularly sue you somewhere. They can manipulate that information, can use that information in some other modes as well. Okay, temporary or permanent closure, that may also lead to the particular temporary or permanent closure of your particular organization if you do not handle that kind of sensitive information. Okay, so this happens actually in almost all the attacks. That is why there is a loss of privacy. Damage of goodwill. Goodwill is particularly your entity, your existence in the market. Any information that is being stolen from you can be manipulated and can be used anyhow somewhere else, that can damage your particular image. Okay, so that is the damage of the goodwill. Dangers of terrorism. Okay, so these are some kind of attacks that basically are used these days by the attackers. And today as well, I will show you some of the stories that how these social engineering attacks are happening. Okay, and probably you might be reading in some of the newspapers as well. Okay, so this is all about social engineering as an introduction. So you can just understand it is basically an act of stealing information from you. Okay. And why it actually happens? Because rather you are very careless, or people can easily convince you. Okay. So that they can get some of the confidential information out from you. Okay. So now I'm moving some on to some of the news. So these are some of the things that you might have noticed in some of the newspapers, and out of these two, what you are seeing on the bottom, these are the current news that happened yesterday. Okay, so I will just go them into one by one, and I think so many people might have heard about this first attack that I have written over it, like this Stucknet. It's basically a malicious computer worm. Okay, but this has been actually used. Okay, and I can tell you something about this because it can be a term, a new term to many of the participants over here. So it's basically a malicious computer worm which is first uncovered in 2010 and thought to have been in development since at least I think so in 2005. Okay, so people or the attackers were developing this, but basically it was uncovered in first 2010. And basically what happens, it targets the supervisory control and data acquisition systems. If you have heard about this term, that is SCADA, which is basically used to visualize the power plant operations or some of the critical infrastructure operations. So this is the SCADA, that is supervisory control, okay, and data acquisition system. Okay, so Stuxnet targets basically the SCADA system and is believed to be responsible for causing substantial damage to the nuclear power plant of Iran. Okay, so that was the news actually. And how that happened, the attackers basically distributed the USBs, the drives actually, which consist of this kind of malicious programs, that is Stuxnet, in free. And what you are getting in free, you just accept that. Okay, if you can get something in free, then obviously you can take. Suppose I go to the market and there I can just see a person giving free USB, so obviously there will be a thing in my mind that I should take that particular USB. So that what happened in this particular attack as well. Okay, so free USBs were just actually gifted, okay, or they were distributed and the people accepted that, and they have plugged that particular USB onto their particular system, and that was the story behind this attack, that is stucknet. So that was the socially engineered kind of attack where the people were basically given those free USBs. They were basically being eluded for that, and they accepted that and used that and plugged that into their system. Okay, so there was entire story behind that. So I'm not going into the technical detail because what it basically consists of, which vulnerability basically being exploited. So you can go into these details as well. Okay, so this was the first case that happened in 2010. You can just get into the Wikipedia of this particular thing. Secondly, if you just see over here, these are some of the recent news if you have heard yesterday as well. So basically, if you have heard of Twitter Bitcoin scam, okay, that hacked the accounts of prominent users like Barack Obama, Elon Musk on Wednesday, okay, was a result of the coordinated socially engineered attack, okay, that basically targeting the employees, okay. The social media that basically the Twitter claimed of that this happened actually because of some of the socially engineered attacks. How did it happen? You have to go on to that particular page, but I can tell you something in detail. The attack led to the fake posts from more than a dozen popular accounts and forced the company to delete the messages and lock out a much larger network of users, okay, as it tried to secure the site, okay. So this was the case basically that happened because of the socially engineered kind of an attack, that what the Twitter claimed today. So this is from today's news as well, both of this. We and what they have actually told. Also, I can just tell you something like they told that they detected what they believe actually to be coordinated socially engineered attack by people who successfully targeted some of the Twitter employees which have the access to the internal systems and the tools, okay. So the attackers basically targeted the people who have the basic access to the internal network of that particular multinational company or the social websites, that is Twitter. So that is why they have been basically attacked. So this kind of strategies are basically being followed these days, and you can know how big these names have, like Barack Obama or the Elon Musk. So their accounts has been basically being used, okay. So this was the story that these days are basically going. So socially engineered or the social engineering attacks are basically happening these days on a very high rise, okay. So these are some of the news which you can follow. So these were some of the attacks that happened in history as well. So I will not go into much detail, but I can tell you some points related to them. Like if you can see on the screen, the first attack that I have written over here, like the Toyota, if you have heard about the first one, the Toyota 2019, that what happened in this corporation, it is an auto parts supplier, and basically the victim of a social engineering and business email compromise attack, okay, that happened in 2019, okay, last year. And basically what happened, the money lost amounts actually to the USD 37 million, which you and the attackers basically used persuasion, and they persuaded a finance executive, okay, to change the recipient's bank account information in a wire transfer, okay. So basically they persuaded a finance executive to change a certain kind of an information that is related to its bank credential, okay. So that what happened in this kind of an attack. There are other attacks if you have heard about this. So this is most common that happened during the elections or the US elections in 2016, and it is one of the most what you call as the iconic cases of social engineering in United States presidential election in 2016, okay. And what happened, if you have heard about this term, I will just explain you in some detail as well. This is spear phishing. So spear phishing attacks led to the leak of emails and information from the Democratic Party. Okay, so there was a party called as Democratic Party from which the current president Donald Trump belongs to. So this is the Democratic Party that may leak that may have influenced the result of the election. Okay, so you might have heard in the news as well with Donald Trump's victory over Hillary Clinton. Okay, so what the hackers have done, the hackers created a fake email from Gmail inviting users through a link. Okay, so you basically get a link these days on your email. So that what happened, to change their passwords due to some unusual activity, and the attackers or the fraudsters then had the access to hundred of emails, okay, containing sensitive information about the uh, campaign that was happening actually. Okay, so this is something related to this social engineering background. So you can have too many attacks. If this term is not a new term, so you can have too many attacks starting from this particular 2020 that I've shown you on the last slide back to the RSA 2011. Okay, so RSA is itself a security company. If you have heard about this algorithm RSA, so it's Travis Chamber and Alderman. So it's basically, they've also faced this kind of an attack, which basically started with an Excel document. Okay, there was a data sheet sent to small group of employees via email. Okay, and the email subject said something like it's a recruitment mail. Okay, recruitment plan. So everybody got into that mail, and the attachment contained a malicious file which opened a backdoor for the hackers. Okay, so that what happened in the RSA. So you can get to these particular historical events that had happened. Okay, so nowadays these are pretty common. That is why we are concentrating more on this social engineering kind of an activity. Okay, so I think so a bit term is clear. So we'll move on to some of the things that are ahead of this particular discussion. So like we can talk about some of the behaviors which are basically vulnerable to attacks, how people get into these kind of attacks. So I can tell you one by one. So if you have questions, we can take at the end. Okay, so this is the first. So the major concern, see, is one of the major vulnerability that basically leads to the type of attack is trust. Okay, the user basically trusts another user, okay, in the organization, and does not secure their credentials from them. Okay. Okay, one thing more, if I think so I am audible to everyone, and if somebody says that I can talk and some assimilate some of the Hindi terms into that, so I can do that as well. Okay, so you can tell me in the chat box. I can communicate something in Hindi and as well as in English as well if there is a problem. Okay, so the users basically trust another user and does not secure their credentials from them. Okay, so obviously if you have two friends actually, so you can, there's a probability that you can share your particular credentials because of the trust. Okay, but this may lead to an attack by the user to the second person, which may reveal the information to the third one as well. Okay, so there is a particular trust issue that is an human nature, and it can be a basis of this socially engineered attack. Okay, second, what happens, a lot of ignorance comes into the picture. Organizations are basically unaware of social engineering attacks, and its countermeasure and precaution are also vulnerable to this attack, like insufficient training program and education to the employees create a vulnerability in the security against social engineering. Okay, so this is the main thing, that there is unawareness to these kind of attacks, and each organization must train their employees, okay, to be aware of this social engineering attacks. Okay, so there should be a kind of an awareness program on people itself can learn some of the awareness to these kinds of attacks as well. Okay, also each organization must secure its infrastructure physically very well and employ having a different level of authority should be restricted to perform in their restricted privileges. Okay, I think so. Restricted privileges are known to many of us who are taking this course. Restricted privileges means every particular person at each level of your organization must have a kind of a privilege to the organizational unit. Okay, so this kind of restricted privileges should be there. Okay, that there should not be a case that everybody can see everybody's data. Okay, so that should be a case that it should have some of the restricted kind of privileges. So employees should not be allowed to should not be allowed to access the departments such as finance, and he should be restricted to its allowed departments only, okay, in which he or she is working. Also, like in the case where an employee is free to move, may perform social engineering by dumpster diving. So I will take this term in some of the later slide as well. This is also a dumpster diving is a term you might have heard, but I will be just discussing this term in a slide. And there is also shoulder surfing. So I will take these two terms as well. Okay. So I will let you know what are these. So conclusively, I can tell there is lack of security policies and privacy, which may lead to the vulnerabilities, and security policies must be enough to prevent an employee for impersonating another user. Okay, impersonating means they should not exactly copy what are the particular things that are happening with one person to the other. Also, the privacy in between unauthorized people or client and the employee of an organization must be maintained to keep secure from the unauthorized access or from being stealed. Okay, so these are the things that must be kept in mind. Otherwise, there are vulnerabilities acting in your ecosystem in which you are working. So trust is an issue. Ignorance means a kind of unawareness. People do not know about these kind of things. Third is the fear of severe losses. Okay, so every organization must uh, have a role, like they should have a particular trust and used a kind of privilege actions to their particular employees which are working in different departments. And last but not the least, there should be a sense of moral obligations. Okay, that I am taking my own responsibility. I will not be doing this kind of an attack. Okay, so these are some of the things that we will be discussing. But these are the two terms which we will discuss in the upcoming slides related to the social engineering attacks. Okay, now why this particular social engineering is so much effective these days? Okay, so people might be hearing all these terms on a frequent basis, but why this is particularly so much effective? Okay, so I have listed a few points, but I will go into them one by one. Like uh, it is equivalent of pointing to an imaginary spot, okay, on someone's shirts, if you can say like this, only to flick their noise when they look down. But by posing someone trustworthy, a cyber criminal is given the opportunity to do as they will with a business data. Okay, so these attacks have two factors given in the favor. Okay, so the security policies that you basically build must be very strong. There should not be any loopholes in that. Okay, so the particular person working in your organization must have full faith that after abiding by these particular policies, everything will be perfectly fine. Okay, so security policies must be well maintained and followed by everybody in your particular organization. Okay, otherwise that can be the weakest link to get into the particular organization or to a particular person and to steal his or her credentials, okay, and the data. Similarly, social engineering attack is not the kind of attack the average user is on the lookout for. Okay, so it is not a very common, but it's very well planned and targeted actually. Okay, so they will have instead heard about the botnets and the ransomware and the other big external threats, and won't think of the question what seems to be legitimate looking message. Okay, so everybody is very much uh, known to the terms like ransomware or the other threats, but a small loophole like the website which is looking like a legitimate website may actually can steal your particular credential. Okay, so these kind of socially engineering attacks happen, and which are very common, but might not be because of the unawareness. People do not get into those particular things. Okay, so you are very much aware about the ransomware, you are very much aware about the malwares, but there can be possibilities कि आप इन छोटी छोटी चीजों को छोड़ देंगे. ओके, सो आई कैन से दैट पर्टिकुलर थिंग इन हिंदी एज वेल कि देयर कैन बी अ पॉसिबिलिटी कि आपको रैंसमवेयर के बारे में मालूम है, यू आर नोन टू द malwares. ओके, बट देयर कैन बी अ पॉसिबिलिटी कि आपको सोशल इंजीनियरिंग अटैक्स के बारे में मालूम ही नहीं चलता. एक पूरी लेजिटिमेट वेबसाइट आपके पास है which exactly looks like to the particular website which you are using on a day to day basis, जिसको आप डेली बेसिस पे यूज कर रहे हैं और आप अपने उसमें क्रेडेंशियल्स लूज कर देते हैं. ओके, सो दैट कैन बी अ पॉसिबिलिटी. So you have to be very careful. And also like there is a plenty of data, okay, which is readily available on the internet to help build a convincing social engineering attack. So there is a lot of what you can say as the attack vectors which are basically available, attack bases which are basically available to the attackers, from where they can get information and can use towards you. So they can have a targeted attacks also. Okay, so there is plenty of information available जिसका वो यूज कर रहे हैं आजकल आपके लिए. Entire data which is basically belonging to you or corresponding to you, okay, that is easily available to them as well. So they can use that particular thing, they can use your activities, okay, to plan a kind of a targeted attack against you. Okay, so that is what basically happens actually. So they will convince you and then they will use you. I will show you some example in the upcoming slides. And also like there is something called as open source intelligence. Okay, open source intelligence can come from a vast array of data sources which only assists an aspiring social engineering, okay, engineer. And like through some digging on the internet, a social engineer can find plenty of information that better informs their attack. Okay, so अटैकर्स आर बेसिकली डिगिंग आउट ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन, आपको कन्विंस करेंगे, आपसे इंफॉर्मेशन लेंगे एंड दे कैन बेसिकली प्लान दैट काइंड ऑफ एन अटैक यूजिंग दैट इंफॉर्मेशन. ओके, दैट इज व्हाई दिस इज वेरी इफेक्टिव these days. Okay, people are getting prank calls, people are getting phishing mails. Okay, they are having some of the mails with a particular link. Okay, so these are the things which basically are being used at the background of this social engineering attack. Okay, so we'll look at them one by one. So just to, you can just have a look at this particular thing. So what we just discussed, I can just repeat on a quick note. Like security policies must be as strong. I have told you there should not be a loophole in that. Okay, it is difficult to detect social engineering attempts because आपको मालूम है ransomware कैसे attack करेगा, how the other malware or the virus and the worms behave, but you are not very much acquainted with these kind of social engineering attacks. Okay, so that is why it is basically difficult at the which you call as the beginning stage, and when it happens actually तभी आपको मालूम चलेगा. Okay, third is there is no method to ensure complete security. Like we say in security that 100% security is a kind of myth. So that is why there is no method to ensure complete security. Okay. And finally, there is no specific software or the hardware for defending against these kind of an attack. Like for virus, for something you will have the antivirus, you will be having the entire malware systems. There are too many things. Okay. But for a social engineering attack, I can say a particular kind of awareness will help you out. Okay. So this is the main thing, that why these are too much effective these days. So we'll go into them one by one. We'll take some examples also. So now I'll just talk you something in detail about the phases, like how it basically happens. So these are some of the common phases in a social engineering attack. So I will go one by one. So we'll take the doubts at the end. So like I am talking, like social engineering attacks are not the complex attacks which basically require strong technical knowledge. Okay, an attacker might be non-technical person as defined earlier, and it is basically an attack of stealing information from people. And however, the social engineering attacks are performed by the following steps, like I will be just telling you one by one. So like first you can see this, like research on the target company. So what happens in this phase? Research phase basically includes a collection of information about target organization, and it may be collected by dumpster diving, scanning the websites of the organization, finding the information on internet, okay, gathering information from the employees of the target information, etc. So this is kind of the research on the target employee, target company, target website basically happens at the very first stage. Okay, so this is the very first phase what attacker basically follows. Okay, so ये बहुत पहला phase है जिसमें आपकी information को retrieve किया जाएगा. Okay, कैसे करेंगे? तो वो बहुत सारी चीजें हैं, phenomenon है, people basically do this kind of thing. They try to just collect as much as information about their target. Okay. Second, self victim, select the victim or select the target. What happens in this phase of selection? Attackers select the target among other employees of the organization. Okay, and basically a frustrated target is more preferred as it will be easy to reveal information from him. Okay, why we are calling as a frustrated employee? Frustrated means obviously he must be having some of the other doubt. हो सकता है mental states abilities ठीक ना हो, obviously he must be depressed, he must be overburdened. Okay, there can be a case that his particular company is not behaving properly. Okay, that is why he can easily reveal information. So there are too many cases, that is why we can just define him as a frustrated employee. So they basically do a kind of research that out of this bunch of 100 people, which particular employee is to be targeted. Okay, so they do a kind of the research and then they basically select that kind of a victim. Okay, which can be a soft target for them. Okay, develop a kind of relationship. This basically happens at the next stage. Sorry, this basically happens at the next stage. And what happens basically in this relationship phase basically includes creating a relationship with the target in the way that he could not identify the intention. In fact, the target will be trusting the attacker. Okay, moreover, the trust level increases the attacker and will be easier to reveal the information. Okay, so the people or the attacker will try to just develop a kind of a strong relation. Okay, हो सकता है वो starting में कुछ mails करें, कुछ exchanges करें, they will reveal some information about themselves, but it can be fake. But as the thing will progress, they will develop a good kind of a relationship in which that frustrated employee or the selected victim will have a trust on the attacker and will give his or her information to that attacker. Okay, so this kind of a stage can happen. Okay, and lastly, exploit that relationship. So this is the last phase in which exploit of the relationship by collection of sensitive information such as username, passwords, network information, whatnot, etc. Okay, so this is the trajectory actually. मतलब आपका, yeah, somebody is saying like honey trap. Yeah, obviously it's a kind of a honey trap actually. So you will be just diverted toward that kind of a particular attack, but you are not known that is happening with you. आपको मालूम नहीं है, but that is actually happening with you. So you have to be just too much aware about these kind of activities which are basically happening. And since all these situations started like COVID and everything, जैसे ही आपके प्रोसेस चल रहे हैं तो ऑब्वियसली पीपल आर बेसिकली बीइंग अटैक्ड यूजिंग दी सोशल इंजीनियरिंग अटैक्स. लोगों के पास कॉल्स आए रिगार्डिंग दी, लाइक इफ यू कॉल एज दी मॉनिटोरियम इन विच हैज बीन गिवन, जिसमें आपकी 3 महीने की ईएमआईज को आगे बढ़ाया गया. तो प्रैंक कॉल्स बहुत सारे आए. पीपल यूजुअली use that thing और काफी लोगों को उससे काफी नुकसान भी हुआ. So you have to be very much pretty aware about these kind of stuff. Okay, so how those things happen, so I have taken some examples in the upcoming slides, so I will tell you one by one. Okay, so I think so the phases are clear. You just have to research, you have to select the victim. थोड़ा longer term relationship बनेगा. They will eventually call you on a regular basis, emails करेंगे. They will develop a kind of healthy relationship जहाँ पे आप उनके ऊपर trust कर पाएं. After that you will just lose your very important information related to like users name, passwords, anything. Okay, which is very important to you. So on the next slide, this is the type of social engineering, okay, that we basically call. So I will get into their details one by one and will tell you something in brief about what are the basic categories of these social engineering. Okay, so broadly I've categorized over there like human based social engineering, computer based social engineering, and mobile based. So we'll take a single example one by one and try to explain all these terms whatever has been written. Okay, and how these are basically being used. So for the first, like, can be performed by the social engineering attacks can be performed by different techniques, and different social engineering attack techniques are classified like following, as we are on the slide. So first is like human based social engineering. What happens in this, it basically includes one-to-one interaction, okay, with the target, and the social engineer gathers sensitive information that we are talking about from the first slide by tricking, such as ensuring the trust, taking advantage of the habits, behavior and the moral obligation, okay. So वो बहुत सारी ट्रिक्स का यूज करेगा, बट इट कैन बी अ वन टू वन मैप, ओके। वो काफी दिन से आप तक कम्युनिकेट करेगा, ही विल ट्राई टू बिल्ड अ ट्रस्ट and try to give sensitive information by interaction, okay। आपका ट्रस्ट जनरेट करेगा, फिर आपकी हैबिट्स के बारे में जानेगा, आप क्या क्या चीजें सर्व करते हैं, सब कुछ आपकी सारी चीजों को, एक्टिविटीज को देखेगा, एंड फ्रॉम दैट ही कैन गेट टू मच काइंड ऑफ एन इंफॉर्मेशन जो कि वो बाद में यूज करेगा, ओके। सो second is computer-based social engineering. Okay, so obviously, as the name suggests, it is basically carried out with the help of computers. I will tell you how, okay, by just an example. And third is the mobile-based social engineering. And obviously, it is basically carried out with the help of mobile applications. And how it basically happens, we have some examples in the upcoming slides, but these are the broad categorizations that I want to tell you. So, ये थोड़ा सा आपको ध्यान में रखना है कि human-based में क्या है, कंप्यूटर बेस्ड में हम कैसे यूज करेंगे, एंड मोबाइल बेस्ड सोशल इंजीनियरिंग कैसे हो रही, ओके। सो आप उसको डिस्टिंक्शन बाद में डिफरेंशिएशन के साथ करेंगे, ओके। बट दीज आर द ब्रॉड कैटेगरीज, सो आई विल टेक देम वन बाय वन। सो फर्स्टली, लाइक आई हैव टोल्ड यू, जो आपका पहला कैटेगराइजेशन था, दैट इज द ह्यूमन बेस्ड सोशल इंजीनियरिंग। सो फर्स्ट एग्जांपल जैसा इसमें लिखा है एक टर्म इम्पर्सोनेशन के लिए, सो व्हाट इज इट, सो उसको एक बार देखते हैं, देन वी विल गेट इनटू मच डिटेल्स, ओके। So what is impersonation or impersonating is basically what you call as a human-based social engineering technique, and it basically means pretending to be someone, okay, or something. आप pretend कर रहे हैं but आप actually में वो entity नहीं है, okay. So impersonating in social engineering is pretending or of an attacker, or like to be a legitimate user, or pretending to be an authorized person, okay। आप pretend कर रहे हैं लेकिन आप ऐसे हैं नहीं, but you are pretending to be a kind of a legitimate user, okay, or to be an authorized person. This impersonation may be either personally or behind a communication channel, okay, such as while communicating with an email or telephone, etc, okay। So ये कैसे भी हो सकता है। So I have distinctly categorized some points, so I will get into them to make it more clear. Like in the first point, it basically a very common one, where attacker pretends to be someone legitimate or the authorized person. Legitimate जो कि बिल्कुल actual में exist करता है, but वो वैसा pretend करेगा. Obviously, he is in kind of an attacker, so he will just try to pretend like that someone to be very legitimate, okay, or very authorized, but वो ऐसा है नहीं, ताकि आप उस पर trust कर सकें. Similarly, second one, attacker may impersonate a legitimate or authorized person, okay, but उसका communication जो medium है, that can basically differ, okay. So he can be in front of you, he can be behind a communication channel, okay, by using a communication channel like an email, like a phone, okay. So people get calls, people get emails, और ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि one to one आपसे existence में उसका connection हो, okay. Like third is they trick a target to reveal the sensitive information. So this is the main target. ऐसा क्यों कर रहा है? Obviously he want that particular information. वो आपकी credit card की information हो सकती है. It can be any information about your particular organization, whatever. Okay, but this is a kind of strategy basically जो कि use करी जाती है. Okay, social engineering attacks, man. This is a very common one. Impersonation. I think so. This term is now a very nominally very clear, where a person basically try to pretend to be someone very legitimate and authorized, जिस पे आप believe और trust कर सकते हैं, okay, लेकिन वो actual में ऐसा है नहीं, okay, and it usually happens over calls and emails, okay, people are doing this. So I get into this as well, posing as a legitimate end user, I have told you, but I can just tell you something like Personal impersonating is performed by the identity theft when an attacker has enough personal information about an authorized person. The attacker gathers the information impersonating as a legitimate user, provided providing the personal information of the legitimate user, or you can say impersonating as a technical support agent, asking the credential in another way to impersonate and gather the information. Okay, so these are the three different categories that I have shown you. So first one is like posing as a legitimate end user, posing as an important user, as in technical support. So this usually happens. Okay, you get calls actually that I am a technical support person. Okay, बहुत सारे ऐसे calls आपके पास आते हैं that I am from this particular company. I am a technical support. Okay, and people who do not know, who are in remote areas, okay, वो समझते हैं कि उनके पास किसी legitimate company से call आ रहा है, and obviously he is the representative of that company. और वो जैसा कुछ पूछता है, people start doing this, and this basically happens because of the lack of awareness. Okay, secondly, posing as an important person. People usually call that I am calling from this department, I am calling from this government department. So आप उसकी कॉल को बहुत सीरियसली लेते हैं कि हाँ ये इस पर्टिकुलर कॉल है, हाई अथॉरिटी से कॉल आ रही है, तो ऑब्वियसली ही विल बी अ पर्टिकुलर, बट आपको उसको क्रॉस चेक करना चाहिए. ओके, एंड देयर आर टू मेनी वेज टू क्रॉस चेक एक्चुअली. ओके, posing as a legitimate end user. Okay, so give the identity and ask for the sensitive information. Okay, वो आपको बोलेगा कि मैं एक legitimate and authorized user हूँ इस particular का, and obviously he will ask of this particular kind of a sensitive information. Okay, so this is the examples for the impersonation. So it's basically a kind of the honey trap that we have discussed. So this is an example actually. Okay, there are other things actual related to this, so I will just go through quickly so that to cover this particular introductory part. So human based social engineering like impersonation, I've just given a kind of a example where you basically just receive some of the kind of calls. Attacker basically calls a company's help desk, okay, and pretends to be someone in the position of authority in that particular company, okay, and he basically tries to extract some sensitive information out of that help desk. Okay, that generally happens, but these days people at good companies are getting trainings and they are usually aware, but still there is lot of many people who do not know about these kind of things which are happening. Okay, so like I've just written, I can quickly go through. A man calls company's help desk and basically he says he has forgotten his password. Okay, he adds this that if he misses the deadline on a big advertising project, his boss might fire him. So कुछ आपको example देगा, मतलब reason देगा. The help desk worker feels very sorry. ठीक है, वो उसके trap में आ जाता है and quickly resets the password. Okay, unwittingly giving the attacker clear entrance in the corporate network. Okay, so एक scenario है ये. So I'm just telling you about how these things can happen. So there are small scenarios where the impersonation basically happens actually. Okay, so आपको काफी aware होना होगा इन चीजों के लिए. This is the another case of the impersonation scenario where there is a third party authorization, and what basically happens in this, the attacker obtains the name of the authorized employee of the target organization who has the access to the information what which he or she wants. Okay, so वो नाम निकलवाएगा. कैसे निकलवाएगा, उसके लिए भी काफी सारी चीजें हैं. ठीक है, like in the picture you can see there's a authorized employee. Attacker anyhow gains the name of the authorized employee of the target organization. So ये authorized employee था, इसका जो भी particular नाम वगैरह उसकी ID जो भी थी, he get by any means, and after that he basically uses this information and call to the target company by taking I am John, I spoke to this guy last week. So obviously the particular person at the desk will be thinking that this is the authorized employee and he or she can be basically trapped. Okay, so attacker basically calls to the target organization, and when the information is stored and claims that the particular employee has requested the information to be provided. Okay, so this is a kind of a third party authorization what we call actually. So ये वाली scenario भी आपके सामने आ सकते हैं. Okay, so you have to be very specific and clear कि अटैकर्स किस तरह से किसी ऑथराइज्ड पर्सन की आइडेंटिटी को यूज करके किसी टारगेट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के लिए भी यूज कर रहे हैं. ओके, सो this scenario is also coming in picture these days. Like he called, like he's telling that, hi, I am this person, I spoke to particular this guy last week before he went on the vacation, and then he said that you will be able to provide me with this information in his absence. Okay, so ये काफी उसने रिसर्च करी, ही ट्राई टू गेट दैट इन्फॉर्मेशन कि ऐसा हुआ होगा पिक्चर में, सो उसको वहां पे ट्रस्ट हुआ, एंड ऑब्वियसली ही और शी गेट ट्रैप्ड. दैट इज व्हाई उन्होंने अपनी इन्फॉर्मेशन एक्सचेंज करी, एंड ही गेट दैट क्लोज एंट्री इनटू दिस टारगेट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. So this is another scenario. Last but not the least, there is another scenario that is in picture, what we call as the impersonation scenario using this tech support. This is also we have discussed, but I can quickly go through it. Like the attacker pretends to be the technical support of the target organization, okay, and he claims that this is the user ID and this is the password for troubleshooting problem in the organization. Okay, so ये कैसे होता है? Like I have written something over here, you can find it out. Like attacker basically calls, hi, this is Mike with the tech support. Okay, we have had some folks in your office, कुछ लोग आपके ऑफिस में आए हैं, ठीक है, report slowdowns in the logging in lately, is it true? Okay, कि इसके पास कुछ information है that there is a logging और कुछ slowdowns हैं, कुछ चीजें नहीं चल रही. So employee, yes, it had seemed slow lately. Okay, तो वो response करता है. Then the attacker basically get this kind of a thing, yeah, well, we have moved you to a new server. Okay, so obviously that enters into a new picture, and from where he can reveal that kind of thing. Okay, so he says, if you want to give me your password, I can check your service. Okay, so वो बोलेगा कि आप अपना पासवर्ड वगैरह दीजिए, so that we can check कि अब जो नया सर्वर है या कुछ नई मशीन है उसका पर्टिकुलर वर्किंग सही है या नहीं. Then obviously there can be a thing that these information can be revealed. Okay, so this is another case. So obviously this is a scenario, and this is actually happening these days, so we'll not get into much details about this. There are other scenarios like impersonation scenario, where a repairman or a computer technician enters into the target organization, and he or she basically can plant a snooping device. Okay, snooping device is basically a kind of the device which can gain hidden passwords during the activities associated with their duties. Okay, so this is another picture where these social engineering attacks comes into the scenario. Okay, this also happens, but this is not a very good thing to just discuss over here, so I'm not getting, this is much theoretical. This is trusted authority figure, so I will get into these details in the after this slide. Okay, so you can just have something related to the eavesdropping and shoulder surfing, what we are talking about. After this I will go back to that particular slide 15 or the last. So have you heard about this term, eavesdropping and someone shoulder surfing? I think so, this is very common. Okay, so how human-based social engineering is basically happening. So I can just tell you in short what eavesdropping is. It's basically a technique in which the attacker is revealed information by listening to the conversation covertly. Okay, covertly means he anyhow get into that particular communication channel and just listen to the conversation. Okay, and it does not include listening to the conversation, it basically includes reading or accessing any source of information, okay, without being notified. So that is what eavesdropping is all about. And similarly, the other term that comes into the picture is shoulder surfing. It is basically defined is defined in the section of if you have heard about footprinting. Okay, so shoulder surfing in short is basically a method of gathering information by standing behind the target. Okay, when he is interacting with some of the sensitive information, like you can see into this picture, if you're working onto this particular machine and anyhow somebody is standing at the background and is getting that information, okay, what is on your particular system. So aisa ho sakta hai. Okay, so that is why shoulder surfing, it basically uses the direct observation technique such as like looking over to someone's shoulder, किसी के कंधे से ऊपर देखना, इसको आप ऐसे भी हिंदी में कह सकते हैं. वो आपके पास जबरदस्ती आपकी इंफॉर्मेशन को पढ़ रहा है. ओके, क्यों पढ़ रहा है? To just get out some of the information like your passwords, PIN numbers, account numbers, credentials, like this. Okay. Also, but in the picture, it is clear कि ये बहुत पास से ही हो सकता है, ऐसा पॉसिबल नहीं है, लेकिन आज की डेट पे we have high vision enhancing devices. Okay, so this kind of shoulder surfing activity can be easily done from some of the distant places. उसको दूर की places से भी किया जा सकता है अगर आपके पास longer vision enhancing device है तो. Okay, so this is an example from where covertly anybody can just read that particular information और आपको पता नहीं चलेगा, and that information then will be further used. Okay, so this is a normal thing. And eavesdropping is obviously like an unauthorized listening of the conversations. खाली सुनेगा नहीं, obviously उसको use करेगा. He can intercept that particular communication, चाहे वो audio हो, video हो, it can be some of the communication in written as well. So that is an eavesdropping case. Okay, और फिर जो information उसको मिल रही है, obviously he can use it as an attack thing and can target that particular person. Okay, in general. So this is what we call as human based social engineering. Okay, so we'll just move a slide ahead like this. You can see over here that what we are talking about, and there is a new term to be discussed which we left, and then we'll dumpster diving. Okay, so what is dumpster diving? I think so people might have heard in the common news, but let's have just a discussion. Like, it is a process of
Yes.
looking for treasure in trash. Okay, have you heard about like a treasure in trash? Trash is there, and what is a treasure in trash? There are trash bins as well. Okay, so this technique is older, but this is still effective. Okay, and it basically includes the accessing the target's trash, such as what we call as printer trash, user desk, company's trash for finding phone bills, contact information, financial information, source codes, and other helpful material. Okay, so this trash bin is also very important. Okay, so this bin is everywhere. It's in your particular computer as well. Okay, it can be into your emails as well. It can be into your company's dustbins as well. People basically throw out those bills. These bills can have some of the account information which can be used further. Okay, so this is termed as dumpster diving. It is very old technique, लेकिन अभी भी काफी effective है. Like if you go onto the ATM, so people say that do not leave your particular receipt over there. आप अपनी receipts को वहाँ पे ना छोड़ें, साथ ले जाएं. Obviously, usually that kind of data can be used, but obviously उसमें पूरी information नहीं होती है. But at points, people can use those particular information to complete some of the information which they earlier have. Okay, so it can have the phone bills, it can have the contact information, financial information जो आपके receipts पे है. There can be some of the operation information. Okay, operation information आपके mail boxes के through मिल जाएगी. Okay, कि आपने ट्रैश किया, that can be compromised or the mail server got compromised, so obviously that information can be easily revealed. Okay, so this is what dumpster diving is all about, and can be a new term, but it is very old. There is shoulder surfing, and this is eavesdropping. So all these can be combinedly used. Attackers are using all of them. Okay, or they can just use a single. That depends entirely upon that what kind of information they want. Okay, कैसी information चाहिए, कितनी information चाहिए, so obviously that entirely depends on them. Okay, so अभी तक आपको ये समझ में आया होगा कि किस तरह से वो information को collect कर रहे हैं. उसका misuse कैसे करेंगे वो एक अलग बात है. अभी तो खाली information gathering चल रही. Okay, so you just have to be very aware. Okay, you have to keep your ears and everything very open. Okay, so this is the last thing that I just want to discuss in this human-based social engineering. There are few terms written over there, and काफी terms आपको इनमें से मालूम होंगे, like reverse social engineering तो नहीं, piggybacking and tailgating. So I will just tell one by one, okay, and how they can be used actually. So, like a reverse social engineering attack requires the interaction of attacker and the victim. Okay, and where an attacker convinces the target of having a problem or might have an issue in future. Okay, and if the victim is convinced, he will provide the information required by the attacker. Okay, and reverse social engineering is performed in few steps, like what we call as the an attacker damages the target system or identifies the known vulnerability, and secondly he does like the attacker advertises himself, okay, as an authorized person for solving that problem, and then what he does, the attacker gains the trust of the target and obtains access to the sensitive information. And finally, upon successful uh, reverse social engineering, the user may often get the attacker for the help. Okay, so this is what the trajectory for reverse social engineering. And if it is unclear, so मैं इसको एक बार repeat कर सकता हूँ. देखिए सबसे पहले क्या होगा, an attacker basically damage the target system or basically identifies the known vulnerability. Okay, and then in the second step, what he does, the attacker advertises himself as an authorized person for solving that problem. पहले तो काम खराब किया और अब बोल रहा है कि मैं ही सही कर सकता हूँ. It's like that case. Okay. And third में attacker basically gains the trust of the target and obtains access to the sensitive information. जब ठीक कर देगा तो obviously you will be having trust on him or her. Okay. And finally, जब उसको trust हो जाएगा तो upon successful reverse social engineering, the user may often get the attacker for the help. Okay, और जब actual में फिर कोई problem होती है, then obviously he or she will be again invited for that. So ऐसी situation मैंने यहाँ पे लिखी भी है, अगर आप देख सकते हैं. A situation in which the attacker presents himself as an authority and the target basically seeks the advice, offering the information that he needs. Okay, तो जो उसको information चाहिए वो ले सकता है, लेकिन अपने को authoritative position पे दिखा के. Okay, so this is what happens in the reverse social engineering, and the attack requires the interaction of the attacker and the victim. ये important है. Where an attacker basically convince the targets of having a problem or might have an issue in future. आपको convince करना पड़ेगा कि आपके पास ऐसी problem है या ऐसी problem आ सकती है और उसका solution मेरे पास है. ठीक है, तभी वो आपको invite करेगा. So एक simple सा एक वो है phenomenon. Second, एक आपके पास piggy banking and there is tailgating as well. So these are basically more or less what we call as a similar technique, but still piggybacking is a technique in which what you call as the unauthorized person waits for an authorized person to gain entry in the restricted area, whereas the tailgating is the technique in which the unauthorized person gain access to the restricted area by the following authorized person. Okay, so it can be by using the fake IDs and close following while crossing the what you call as checkpoint. Tailgating become easy. Okay, so still you can check that these are similar techniques, but piggybacking में क्या होता है कि in which the unauthorized person basically waits for an authorized person to gain entry in a restricted area. Okay, like अगर आप यहाँ पे देख सकते हैं, I forgot my ID badge at home, please help me. Okay, unauthorized person allows intentionally or unintentionally an unauthorized person to pass through a secure door. ठीक है, आप एक डोर पे एंट्री कर रहे हैं. ओके, और आपने बोला कि सपोज मेरे पास आईडी नहीं है, ओके प्लीज आप मेरे को हेल्प करो, और सामने वाला है वो एक ऑथराइज्ड पर्सन है ऑन द अदर साइड ऑफ द पर्टिकुलर डोर्स. वो कैसे उस आपको इंटेंशनली या अनइंटेंशनली अंदर आने देता है, दैट मींस एन ऑथराइज्ड पर्सन गेट्स एंट्री इनटू दैट पर्टिकुलर प्रीमाइसेस. ओके, सो ये पिगीबैकिंग है. टेलगेटिंग में आपके पास क्या है, एन अनऑथराइज्ड पर्सन वियरिंग अ फेक आईडी बैज. आपने किसी की आईडी चुरा ली या वैसी कॉपी कर ली या वैसी बना ली, तो वो आप उसका यूज कर रहे हो. ठीक है, एंड एंटर्स अ सिक्योर एरिया. So this is tailgating. Okay, so these are the two ways by which you basically enter into a kind of a premises. Okay, and from where you can use some other techniques to gain some of the information. So these are the first category that we talked about, like the human based social engineering. There are other things as well, so I can take few more minutes, I think so, to complete those few more slides, and after that we'll take something different tomorrow. Okay, so as to complete. So I think so human based social engineering is more or less clear. अगर आपके पास कोई doubts होंगे तो we'll take at the end. So this is the another category what we are talking about, like computer based social engineering. So there are different ways, like on the screen you can see, to perform computer based social engineering, like including pop-up windows requiring login credentials. Okay, आपके पास daily basis पे एक pop-up window site में आती है और आपका login information आपसे मांगती है. You cannot trust on that particular pop-up informations. Okay, or the pop-up windows, like I've written as well over there. You can see on the first point this, that suddenly pop-ups while surfing over the net and ask for user information to log in or sign in. Okay, so please be very aware of that. ओके अगर वो ऑथेंटिक आपको लगता है तभी आप ऐसा करिएगा, अदरवाइज ट्राई टू इग्नोर दैट दीज काइंड ऑफ पॉपअप विंडोज व्हिच आर कमिंग ऑन टू योर पर्टिकुलर स्क्रीन, अदरवाइज you will be in a trap. Okay. Oh, okay. There can be internet messaging and emails such as hoax letters, chain letters, and spam. Hoax letters, I think so. People might have heard. These are basically the emails that issue warnings. Okay. वो आपको warnings issue करती हैं to the user on new virus, trojans, forms that may harm the user systems. Okay. So these are termed as the hoax letters. And how they can be used? Probably you do not have any चैनल टू जस्ट वेरीफाई देम. आपको ये नहीं मालूम है कि जो आपके पास ईमेल्स आ रही हैं वो पर्टिकुलरली ऑथेंटिक सोर्सेज से हैं या नहीं है. सो इफ यू कैन जस्ट जस्टिफाई देम देन ओनली जस्ट यूज दोस पर्टिकुलर वार्निंग्स एंड अप्लाई व्हाटएवर हैज बीन रिटन इन दोस मेल्स. ओके, ऐसा नहीं कि कुछ भी लिखा है और आपने उसको फॉलो अप करके कुछ चीजों को यूज किया. सो ऑब्वियसली यू कैन बी ट्रैप्ड और कॉम्प्रोमाइज्ड. Chain letters are basically, they can offer you something, they can give you gifts. They are basically termed as an illusion mails also. Okay, वो आपको हो सकता है मनी ऑफर करें. They can offer you a software on a condition कि 1 year free trial है, you can use this, but you have to register. आपको register करना पड़ेगा. आप register करते हैं तो obviously there can be a person. Okay, user has to forward the email to set number of person. Okay, आपको हो सकता है कि वो जो particular links थे आपको forward करना पड़े, and you cannot trust on those particular links as well. Instant chat messenger. Okay, they try to basically gather personal information by chatting. Okay, with selected online users to get information such as birth dates and maiden names. Okay, so आप पहले आपके पास जैसे किसी वेबसाइट पे आप सपोज कर लो एंटर करते हो, there is a kind of a help which comes in form of a chat window and they try to just intervene with you. Okay, so if that particular website is an authentic website, so obviously it is very good. But if it is not, then you have to be very much aware about that. Okay, because they will try to chat with you and obviously on the move, जैसे जैसे वो आगे बढ़ेंगे, there can be phases and you can reveal some of the information जो कि आपको नहीं करनी चाहिए. Last but not the least is spam emails. Obviously आप लोगों ने सुना होगा. Spam emails are basically the irrelevant, what you call as unwanted emails, which can be related to some of the financial information, social security numbers and network information. So ये spam emails हैं जो कि आपके पास आती हैं daily basis पे. Junks बहुत सारे हैं. They can have too many things into them which can be easily used. Okay, so these are some examples what we are talking about computer based social engineering, but we will take them one by one because we have something to show in demo also. So we'll take that particular activity on some other day. There are 2-3 more slides, but I think so I should take some questions and end this particular thing. So we have just discussed what is social engineering as an introduction. I can tell you in case you have some problem. I've shown you some of this particular news what we are following these particular days, and this is not very new. This has been happening since a decade now. What are the basic phases? We have discussed how it's basically being effective. Phases are these. So we have discussed these things as well. Now, what are the categories? So we are focusing on the categories, and till today's lecture, I am just focused on this particular human-based, and I have told something about the computer-based activities. Okay. So I think so I should stop here because I am over the time. Okay. So we'll complete this particular thing tomorrow as well, and then we will show you some of the demo that how this particular impersonation has been done actually. We'll take some examples and we'll show you the live demo for that, how this impersonation happens and how people can steal information if eventually you log in through those credentials. अगर आपके उस credential से log in करते हो तो किस तरह से वो आपके credentials को reveal करते हैं, तो वो थोड़ा सा हम आपको देखेंगे on the next, and I think so. So probably I ask people to have a few questions, and I request the host. I think so I'm ending this. Yeah. So sir, can you tell about the Sony attack? So I can tell you about these Sony Pictures 2014. So have you heard about this particular attack? I think so. People might have heard about these Sony Pictures attack in 2014 that happened. So what happened? I can tell you like what happened in the story. After the investigation, like the FBI was in the investigation. So the FBI pointed out that the cyber attack on Sony Pictures in 2014 was the responsibility of the North Korea government. Okay, so that was in the news. And what happened, the thousands of files including what do you call as business agreements, financial documents, employees information, okay, were stolen, and Sony pictures were targeted by spear phishing attacks. Okay, so it appears like employees were lured, okay, उनको मतलब काफी ज्यादा कुछ दिया गया था, okay, they can be actually given some of the monies which were basically lured, okay, by fake Apple emails, okay, so उनको किसी भी तरह से बस बताया गया कि ये जो आपके पास emails आ रही हैं, these are basically fake Apple emails, so anything like this had happened, okay, and compromise में काफी सारी चीजें उनसे चुरा ली गई थी. So this was a normal story, but you can get the entire wiki page related to Sony pictures 2014 what happened, and the entire investigation story is all over there. Okay, और अगर आपके पास कुछ हो तो आप बताइए. बाकी ये spear phishing का जो लिखा है, so I will take this particular thing tomorrow. We'll discuss this particular when we move on to the other slides. आपके पास और भी कुछ है तो पूछ सकते हैं आप. So this is much introductory thing that would happen today. कि सोशल इंजीनियरिंग क्या है, आपको खाली अवेयरनेस होनी चाहिए क्योंकि डेली बेसिस पे हो रहा है. एंड स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम, इफ यू जस्ट सी द न्यूज, अगर आप उसको फॉलो अप करेंगे तो काफी देखेंगे कि आप कोविड जब से शुरू हुआ है, स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम दी लॉकडाउन एंड पीपल स्टार्टेड वर्किंग इन दी वर्क फ्रॉम होम कल्चर, सो दिस इज वेरी प्रीटी मच कॉमन. ओके, आपको प्रैंक कॉल्स आ रहे हैं रिलेटेड टू द मॉनिटोरियम, समथिंग एल्स, पीपल आर गेटिंग बीइंग कॉम्प्रोमाइज्ड. So this is what an example, live example of social engineering attacks. Okay, और इनसे बचने का कोई खास कोई ऐसा टूल नहीं है. You have to be too much aware about these kind of an activity. But still we will have some demonstration related to this so that आपको actually मालूम चले अगर impersonation होता है तो किस तरह से आपके login credential आपसे जाएंगे. Okay, so I think so I don't